President Bola Tinubu on Tuesday met with service chiefs and other top brass of security agencies in Abuja, ostensibly to discuss the worsening spate of insecurity across the country. The service chiefs in attendance included the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Taoreed Lagbaja, the Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Hassan Abubakar, and the Chief of Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Emmanuel Ogala. Meanwhile, the Inspector General of Police, Kayode Egbetokun, earlier on Monday convened a crucial meeting with the force management team and tactical squads to address the rising concerns surrounding insecurity in the country. Security and policy analyst Dr. Kabir Adamu joins us now to discuss this latest round of presidential summons and how government at all levels can redouble efforts shoring up security as well as curb crimes. Many thanks for being here, Dr. Kabir. Always here, of course, we're talking about insecurity. And now we're looking at this recent meeting with the service chiefs. What specific measures and strategies would you say should be top priority to address this prevalent issue of abductions and, of course, overall crime in the country, especially in the context of abduction pandemics? Over the last week, we've had a series of, different stories and testimonies of people's family members being kidnapped. What should be top priority in this meeting, Dr. Kabir?
Thank you very much. So this is a high-level meeting, but we're a bit worried. It's not very clear under what platform that meeting was held. There is a structure, a national security architecture, and in that national security architecture, there are recognized constitutional structures. So as an example, Section 25 up to Section 27 provides for the National Security Council. The membership of that council is very clear, and the functions of that council is also very clear. So we are not very sure how the meeting between the president and the service chiefs held. The National Security Council has not been convened. So really, that's, I think, the first thing that I want to convene. And it is a challenge in itself, in that the administrative requirements and support systems that are meant to drive the functions and the purpose of such an important body such as the National Security Council would have been relevant in supporting and pursuing the such a meeting.
Well, we certainly hear you, Dr. Kabir, but whatever the strategy has been, to tackle insecurity since this administration took over, clearly it looks as though it's not necessarily working. And we've seen a high level of coordination, whether it's among these bandits or terrorists or whatever. What does that level of coordination actually bother you when we see that it's apparent when it comes to the terrorists, but it seems to be lacking when it comes to the security forces?
Thank you, Cynthia. So that was the point I was trying to get at when I thought we had lost connection. So yes, I started by laying the foundation that there is a need to follow the national security architecture, all the provisions within the national security architecture and our national laws, all those platforms, there is a need to follow them. In other words, I believe that the National Security Council should have been convened. Number two, there was no statement released after the meeting yesterday, so we don't really know. But however, the president met with an Islamic group after the meeting with the service chiefs. And in that meeting, he talked about banditry. And he highlighted the need to use education to address the banditry challenge in the country. Now, I'm in total agreement of that. I think as a long-term solution, education can help in terms of ensuring that everyone within our local communities within the country at least is educated and also has skill sets that he or she can use for his livelihood. Now, with regards to the level of coordination between the threat elements, the bandits, the terrorists, and the others, and then the apparent lack of that coordination that we're seeing from within our security agencies. I would add another element, which is the element of absence of accountability. We have up to 29 ministries, departments, and agencies. Now, all of these 29 are supposed to work together towards a simple and single purpose, which is to provide human security as encapsulated in our National Security Strategy 2019. However, not many of them even understand this function. Not many of them are working towards that goal. So the coordination that would have allowed them to work together as a group to serve that purpose is missing at the moment, sadly. And I think this is a responsibility that lies with the coordinating elements within the national security architecture, the Office of the National Security Advisor, and then the several ministries of Defense, Interior, Police Affairs, and to an extent, the Presidency and the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. They all have roles to play in enhancing this coordination. Now, the second component of accountability has to do with the National Assembly. There are committees that have responsibility for security. Now, where these 29 that I've mentioned are not functional, they are not meeting their mandates, the oversight function that the National Assembly plays is supposed to wake them up. Remember that it passes their budget, and through that budget passing process, it knows what they are meant to do through a year. And then, of course, through the oversight function, it's able to ask them over a period, why are you not meeting the set objectives that are stated in the budget? So it's a multitude of factors, unfortunately, that have led us to where we are at the moment. But the good news is the president has signed a performance measurement system with a consequence system in place that is being handled by the Special Advisor on Policy and Coordination. Now, it's still very fresh. It was signed in November last year. So we're hoping that in the next few weeks, months, we would see a process where these 29 MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies will be kept on their toes through key performance indicators and a performance measurement system that will be very obvious to those that are meeting the goals and those that are not meeting the goals. So my hope is not lost as far as I'm concerned, especially with this performance system that is in place at the moment.
Okay, Dr. Adamu, let's talk about the lawful interception of telecommunications, because we know that, I'm focusing on the kidnappings that have been happening. We are aware that these kidnappers reach out to family members through text messages or phone calls or whatever means. Under the Nigerian Communications Act, operators in telecommunications space are required to install equipment with interception capability that allows enforcement agencies in occurrences of any public emergency or in the interest of public safety to access this communication data. Now, SIM card ownership for these lines is tracked under a 2011 regulation mandating the collection of personal information, be it fingerprints, photos, that the police can access without a warrant as long as a senior ranking officer in charge gives written approval. Why is this something that has not been looked into? If these kidnappers can reach out to the family members, why can't that information be used to target them and get their location so that they are apprehended?
Maybe if you give me an authority in government, I would be able to answer that question. But on a serious note, I run a consultancy and we support families that unfortunately are victims of abduction. And I can tell you in all sincerity and confidence that most of our security agencies are able to track. They are able to know the locations where sometimes the perpetrators, the abductors are, and of course where the victims are. The challenge, however, because the point I'm trying to make is that there is no absence of knowledge. A former minister recently said he doesn't think they're using it. No, I know they're using it because I'm a practitioner. I've worked with them. They are able to track. The equipment for tracking is there. They're able to access this information from the National Communications Commission when it's necessary through the procedure that you've listed out. So I do not think that they don't do it. They do it. The challenge is this. Rescuing a victim that is already abducted, that is in the hands of gunmen who have not hesitated to execute their victims, is a very delicate act, and it requires tactical prowess of the type that only a precision-led operation where you are able to take out the abductor and ensure minimum hurt or damage to the person that is being abducted before you can go out for such an operation. And I think the challenge, from my honest opinion, is that our tactical proficiency has not reached that sophistication where our security forces can go in and then achieve that type of rescue. And that perhaps is the area where we should focus on. Earlier on, I talked about accountability, and I talked about internal accountability by the MDAs themselves, and then external accountability by the National Assembly. We need to ask the question, every year budgetary provisions are made to these tactical units. They go on training all over the world to the best countries, Israel, the US, name them, and they come back. How come they are not able to achieve that level of precision style operations to rescue victims? Let's remind ourselves, a few years ago, I think 3 years ago or thereabout, a US citizen was abducted in the border area between Niger and Nigeria. What did the US do? It used intelligence, it used this type of tactical precision operations. They were able to rescue him alive. So this is the point I'm making. We have the intelligence. Most times, I can tell you in all sincerity that we do, based on my interaction with the security agencies. The challenge is this other component. And I think somewhere in between there is also the will, whether I call it political will or leadership will, to go out and do these things. Yes, there is a consequence sometimes, but we have to change the scenario where the threat elements are afraid to continue. Right now, an industry for kidnap, for ransom is thriving in Nigeria, and I'm using my word carefully. It's an industry. There are several components involved. They are benefiting from it, and so sadly, I hate to be the harbinger of bad news, but it would continue as long as that industry is thriving.
Well, Dr. Kabir, when you mentioned that we are equipped in terms of the intelligence, but it doesn't seem as though the will is present, it also reminded me of a conversation we had with one of our analysts, Mr. Shubwali, who also said the will is lacking. Now, in the absence of this will, the mistrust is growing, between the citizens and security, the security forces and whatnot. What do you think will be the long-term consequence of this distrust that's being allowed to thrive as this industry, like you said, is booming?
There are several layers of consequences, but I think the most important one is the quality of life of the average Nigerian is being affected. If persons can't go out to their farms, or in instances that we've monitored recently, in the case of Nabi Fire, she and her family went to sleep. They went to sleep, and around 2 a.m. they were abducted. And that's the story of several families in Nigeria. So the quality of life is being reduced. We can also talk about livelihoods. Part of the priorities of this government is food security. And food security is being threatened. Any country that cannot feed itself is facing an existential challenge, and that's where we are. Then foreign direct investment, it will be very difficult. I mean, I run a consultancy and I support international organizations who come to Nigeria. The monies they spend on security is huge. Recently, one of the construction companies, we were told that they're asking for about 1.3 billion to conclude almost a 200-kilometer road. A significant portion of that is going to security. So these are some of the consequences. And then, of course, we can look at the national security implication. Communities are resorting to self-help. So that social contract between communities or individuals, citizens and government is being depleted. If I don't have, or communities don't have the confidence that government will protect them, then they are going to resort to self-help. And the consequences of resorting to self-help is that social contract is being affected. So more and more communities would arm themselves, and then we'll face a situation where the proliferation of small arms and light weapons that we're already dealing with would now become a bigger challenge. So yeah, several consequences, unfortunately. There, I've not spoken about the gender-based violence component of it. It's increasing. More and more women, unfortunately, are being abused, being molested as a result of that.
Okay, Dr. Adamu, thank you so much for that. And you have touched on this earlier, but I want to know how exactly you currently perceive the coordination and the collaboration among the different security agencies in Nigeria, especially when we look at it from an intelligence sharing standpoint. Those issues that have come up that need to be addressed to be able to face security challenges as one. And then when we also backtrack to the issue of corruption within security agencies, which may in fact contribute to the lapses in the fight against crime.
Okay, with regards to intelligence collection and the fusion of intelligence, I know that a lot of work is being done, but there is room for improvement. Intelligence is a painstaking process. It's also a very expensive process. And I know that, for instance, in modern intelligence, there are different fields for collection. The human element, which is called HUMINT, and then the technical component, which is called TechInt. And then there are several other ones, such as signal intelligence. And then in today's world, there is the geo-mapping component, name them. Now, all of that should be fused into a center that all these 29 MDAs that I talked about should be able to provide, that is, feed their intelligence into it in a timely manner, and then they should also be able to collect from it. Now, I'm not sure that is happening at the moment. The structure is there, and if you recall, one of the first things that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu did when he was sworn in May 29th was to visit the Office of the National Security Advisor, and they showed us a room, a beautiful room with several monitoring units. That's an example of what a fusion center should look like. How effective that fusion center is, whether it's receiving feeds from all of the intelligence units of all of these 28, 29 MDAs that I've spoken about. Unfortunately, I don't know, and even if I know, it's not something I'll speak about in public. But my point is that the structure is there. We need to make it effective. We need to make it efficient. Now, feed can come in from different levels. I gave the example of HUMINT, human intelligence. I gave the example of TechInt, and then I also talked about in modern days, the geo-mapping component and name them. And in today's world, AI actually. So that's, I think, where we should be looking at. In today's world, your ability to harness data, your ability to use that data would actually help you. I'm not too sure we're doing that effectively and efficiently at the moment. And so that's, I think, part of the challenge. Because of the sensitivity of intelligence, it's not something I really want to delve into in a public conversation, but I think I've provided kind of a general overview of where we are and what needs to be done. We need to increase training. We need to look at modern collection platforms. As an example, the cyberspace. In today's world, a lot of things are happening in the cyberspace. If you have that capability, you will be able to understand and harness enough intelligence from that unit. So those are things for consideration. With regards to your second question regarding the potential or the possibility of corruption within the security sector, yes, it's a huge concern. And we know, for example, that part of the challenges that have limited our ability as a country to make security more effective is perhaps the diversion of funds meant for certain elements within the sector. Now, that's not to say that it's happening. We know that the security sector is a capital-intensive project. It requires a lot of money, and unfortunately, because of the current inflationary trend that we're going through, that requirement for funds that have even increased. As you're aware, the value of the Naira is depreciating. A lot of what the security sector needs is coming from abroad. And then, of course, just a few days ago, I traveled on the Abuja-Kaduna highway, and the number of patrol vehicles I saw, it was remarkable. And I asked myself, how is the military, because those vehicles were military vehicles, how are they able to sustain that operation, foiling those vehicles, paying the allowances of those personnel? Their medical insurance, name them. All of these are capital-intensive projects. But the question we should ask ourselves is that the most efficient way to handle that matter, or is there a more efficient way that is less, money-consuming, funds-consuming, that can achieve the same purpose? So I think we need to put up our thinking caps. We need to have strategies. We need to engage with experts who can assist in putting forward measures and strategies that are less costly and that can be achieved given the circumstances of our economy. Yes, there is a need to also extend the performance measurement system that I spoke about earlier on into the security sector. And in doing that, we need to strengthen the M&E component within the security sector. I know most people hearing this will talk about confidentiality and all of that, but the internal M&E departments within the security sector, they need to be strengthened. If they're strengthened, what they will do is they will come up with KPIs, key performance indicators.
We'd
Those
like to
KPIs
thank you
would help in reducing both operational and financial corruption.
Dr. Kabir Adamu, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. We appreciate your insights. Thank you for joining us here on Newsday. We hope the right people are listening and they will take action immediately. Thank you so much.